you can get actual precise geographical points through geographical IPs. Right now, we know that this isn't very precise. You can get, but it still gives us an idea of how distributed this geographical points through geographical IPs. Right now, we know that this isn't very precise. You can get, I can actually hear an idea of how distributed this.
Can you guys please? Can you guys
geographical
mute
IPs, right now?
your mic?
On the previous image, and it's spread out like we can see in Europe, especially. We get like a very uniform area of different cities that are actually running nodes in the world. Spread out like we can see in Europe, especially. We get like a very uniform area of different cities that are actually running nodes in the world. Spread out like we can see in Europe, especially. We get like a very uniform area of different cities that are actually running nodes in the world. Spread out like we can see in Europe, especially. We get like a very uniform area. Is that okay? I guess that's better. Reminder to everybody: this is the first InterCon, and there's a lot of things to learn still. The other type of diversity that we can observe in this ecosystem is the miner versus observer or participant node, right? There isn't a specific word for that. I like participant in general because miner nodes are one thing, and then there's these other nodes that are going to be listening to and also sending transactions to the network, right? So we don't have precise data on this. It's very hard to get data on this because of how the tools aggregating this data themselves are actually, they rely upon volunteering data from these node software and clients themselves, right? So basically you have to run this tool on top of your node in order to send information to these aggregator tools. We also don't know precisely how many miner nodes versus non-miner nodes there are in the network, but we do have one very specific number, which is this up here. So what the hash rate is of the network. And today the hash rate of the Ethereum network is around, because this is very exact, this isn't in real time, this is just a screenshot, it's around 200 terahashes per second, which, you know, it's quite big actually. Then there's different types of nodes out there. If somebody in this talk or listening to a recording of this talk wants to run their own node software, I recommend just kind of researching what type of these nodes you'd want to run before doing so. Another type of diversity is, you know, where you can host these nodes themselves, right? So typically, one obvious option is just running this on a computer, like this computer on the left. Another option would be running this on the cloud through AWS or, you know, DigitalOcean, etc., or even running this on ARM or ARM devices, right? Like Raspberry Pis, which are basically just very small computers the size of a fist, approximately. One type of diversity that I specifically personally care about a lot is what we call the client variety, right? So what clients are running these nodes out there. So for those who aren't too technical in listening to this conversation, this talk, a client itself is just software. It's a software that a computer, that a person, that a wallet needs in order to send and receive transactions to the network itself, okay? And there's a lot of clients out there. These are just 4 examples. And basically, this is what a client looks like, okay? So it's not very fun to look at. It doesn't have much of a graphical interface. It's a CLI tool, and it mostly just runs in the background of a computer. The reason I care so much about this variety or this diversity in general is because of how important it is for the ecosystem itself. So if you can see here on the right, there's a pie chart that represents the types of clients in the Ethereum network currently. And about 75% of the clients are running on Geth. And I'm a big fan of Geth. I think it's a great, you know, software, an awesome team. it's a project that's been built from this very chaotic, open sourcey way, and that in itself is is a huge just positive in general for the network itself. But being honest, it's not cool for Get to have 75% of the node share in the network. It's just very dangerous, I guess, to rely upon. It's almost a single point of failure. So thanks to the other 25%, if something ever happened to Get, which has already occurred, by the way, in the past, these other client softwares are going to be there in order to keep the network running, which is great. But just in general, we should strive to diversify that landscape today and get more of other like less represented clients out there running today. So if you are choosing a client, if you want to run a client at home or in your office or on the cloud or wherever, I really would encourage you to look at the other client softwares and don't just go to the default solution, which would be Get. This slide wasn't mine, so I'll just briefly touch upon it. There's several benefits to running a node, helping the ecosystem and the community itself. There's personal benefits to do so, and just in general, it's quite fun. Another one of my non-slides. There's different costs to running each one of these types of nodes. So before doing so, maybe just use this table here as a reminder and kind of choose one you're more comfortable with. My own feedback and experience running a node is the following. Now, before starting, I should kind of give this disclaimer, I guess, which is that I do have previous experience running these kinds of things. So I used to have like a small mining farm at one point, and this was definitely an experience that helped me with what I was getting into. Having said that, it's still relatively easy and very accessible. Okay, so what I personally did was I got my old ThinkPad computer, which is like a very thick 5 centimeter laptop, kind of heavy and robust like they were back in the old days. It's still quite fast, but it's very accessible. I mean, this computer you could buy it on eBay for, let's say, 100 euros or something like that. I added it. I installed a distro, Ubuntu, but it could be any other OS, I guess. Personally, I work at Pegasus and we built Besu, so I thought it was just completely natural to choose Besu, but I chose Besu specifically. You could choose any other client. I installed it. It was a very straightforward process, installing it, reading the instructions of the installation process and of how to run it in the Besu docs themselves. I then ran the software, which was very straightforward again. All you have to do is just type Besu and enter on the command line. And then, to be fair, I did have to tweak it a bit. And that's why this talk might be useful for you. But I eventually got to sync with mainnet, which I'll explain what means more precisely later on. And to do that, I basically followed this kind of thought process, I would say. So the first thing I did was just run Besu, right? And great. I mean, Besu is all you need to run this client, specific client on mainnet and have it sync with mainnet. But there were more things that I wanted to do with the client. Typically, I wanted to be able to communicate with the client. I wanted to be able to send it information and retrieve information from it. And for that, you have to open the RPC API port. So you have to add this RPC HTTP enabled flag to your command line. So just to be very clear, you have to stop your currently running node and just rerun it with that flag there. The other thing I noticed is that it was taking a very, very long time to sync. This is valid for all clients out there. If you want a full archival very long time to sync of your client, it's gonna take a long time to sync. I would say it's probably gonna take between 30 and 90 days to sync. So I would recommend today, at least personally, what I did was run it with sync mode fast, which is just a fast mode. It will, instead of taking 90 days, it'll take 2 or 3 days to sync with mainnet. There's definitely some disadvantages to this in terms of decentralization and relying upon others' data, etc. But basically, I think it's a good compromise between security and decentralization and just comfort. And the last thing I would recommend running it with is with pruning enabled. So pruning, in other words, just simply means using less disk space on your computer. There's there's many ways to call each one of these flags and options. In each client, they call them slightly differently and they do slightly different things, but they all have similar concepts, okay? And this is kind of what we recommend, me, William, and Greg recommend running each one of these client softwares with. I'd recommend, like, if you choose a specific client out there, just go and research which one of these options you would want and what flags you would want to run it with. So if you want to get more information on running a node on a ARM device, so these small computers that you see here, I'd recommend getting in touch with Greg Janmar. His Twitter handle is on that first and last slide that I'm going to be showing, and he can get you more information on that. So these are all his slides. Again, I'll be posting this on, I already posted it on the channel, and I'll probably post it on Twitter. And if you want more information on how to run a node in your background, so basically having a desktop computer with your node running in the background, and you can use the computer for other things in the foreground, that was William's part of the talk, so you can get in touch with him to ask him specific questions about that. Now, having said that, any of these examples you can also ask me about after the talk, and we'll talk about those anyways. So for the quick demo part of this talk, what we did in UTC was kind of really explain differences between what it is to sync a node, and the process of it syncing and what it does and what it requires your computer to do and what it means, really, and the difference between that and once it's synced and how those differ, right? So as you can see here in this graph, you can see that basically at approximately half the time of these graphs, it's only downloading the very first current blocks, right, until he gets all of the blocks, and then he starts to sync with the network. To get all sorts of detailed information and graphs on this, and to be able to monitor your nodes and your resources, computer resources, there's this one thing that I would recommend is using a mix of Prometheus and Grafana to get these nice dashboards that you can see here on the right and monitor your nodes in real time, basically. Just as a shout out to Bezu again, this comes kind of built out of the box and comes built in with Bezu. I think Geth also has lots of possibilities to add Grafana to your node software, so kudos to them as well. As for ETH2, this wasn't my part of the talk, but so lots of disclaimers here. Not only am I not an expert, this is also a very new ecosystem and things are changing very quickly. But all in all, I'd say my conclusion about this is that there's even though it's very new and there's things are changing very rapidly, and I don't know if the situation is going to be the same in 6 months' time or even less than that or in a year's time. There's still some very cool implementations of these Ethereum 2 clients out there. These are maybe 3 noteworthy mentions. So Lighthouse, Prysm, and again, my biased preferred option being Teku, made by Pegasus. I would really encourage everybody as well to kind of test them out. If you find problems with them, why not create an issue on their GitHub page and just kind of let the community know, and that way we can move forward quicker. So yeah, so that's the talk. But I guess I would have just 2 conclusions for this talk. If you can take away 2 things from this talk, the first one is running a node at home or in your office or wherever is actually quite easy, and I would recommend everybody do so. And the other thing is, let's try to diversify that node client software landscape. Let's get other nodes out there representing running in the network, just to kind of be sure that if something happens, then the Ethereum network is going to continue functioning as normally as possible. So again, if you want to get in touch with us for whatever question, these are our Twitter usernames, and feel free to reach out with comments or questions. Anybody have any questions or comments that you want to ask now?
Felipe, you said that for syncing a node, it would take 30 days. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I said it depends on what options you run it with, but it'll go from 2 days to 90 days. So that's a big difference, right? So basically, if you're going to run it with fast sync on, it's going to take 2 or 3 days. If you don't want it with fast sync on, or if you want a full node or an archival node, that's going to be like a 2 or 3 month sync. Now, the other option you would have, and I don't personally recommend this, but you could eventually copy that data off of a node that you trust. So if you have a friend that runs a node, you can copy his hard drive somehow, and then get the data from that that sync he already has, and get it onto your hard drive somehow. And that way you wouldn't have any sync time, basically. But again, I wouldn't recommend this. It means trusting that node, and that you never know what happens in between.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll be wondering if you can answer the question. So what is the benefit for the individual organization running a node besides from like the data that comes with it? Is there any other benefit? Like I can imagine like being able to directly send messages to the network, something like that, or is it just the data you get?
Yeah, exactly. So so there's several different benefits. They really just, and there's a slide here about that. Let me get to that. So him one day is worth a lot. I guess it could be worth it, and it could be interesting. Maybe, but that's a whole other thing.
maybe there could be ways like to apply this quadratic funding that's used by Gitcoin grants to like fund people who provide nodes, right?
Actually, I
Like-
think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, like have this incentive structure for funding nodes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At least paying for possibly the hardware itself or the costs themselves. That's actually a really good idea. Yeah.
Nice.
In fact,
Yeah, and one
send me a message after, because I don't know what your username is, because I don't see anything other than my own slides here. So can you send me a message on this after?
Yeah, I will do it on Twitter. Okay.
Awesome.
That's, and one more question. Sorry, if
Sure.
what is you were speaking of that scenario? Let's say if like this 75% of guest clients bug out of nowhere, what would happen to the network? Would it just become less insecure because there's less nodes, or can it really have more direct implications?
So there's going to be, probably two types of implications to that. The first one is, you mentioned it. I mean, if the miner nodes themselves, for some reason, stop syncing, all Geth miner nodes stop syncing, of course, there's going to be less security in the network because there's less miners securing the network. But also, it's just going to be a much slower network, going through 25% of the nodes instead of the whole 100% of the nodes. So the network itself is going to slow down eventually to a halt, even maybe. And in fact, if you read up on the history of Ethereum, so you're going to be going through 25% of the nodes instead of the whole 100% of the nodes. So the network itself is going to slow down eventually to a halt, even maybe. And in fact, if you read up on the history, very, very big famous example that happened in 2016, I think, while the community was in, I guess, Shanghai. I think that's what it's called, actually, the Shanghai attack. And I'm not exactly sure which one of the two main clients stopped working. It was either gas or parity, but the one that continued working actually saved the network, because the network never stopped because there was this other client out there.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you very much, Felipe.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very informative.
Cool, thanks. I think we have time for one last question if anybody has one. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Take that paper folding as a no. Anyways, thanks everybody for attending, and yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to me on Twitter or anything. See you around, everybody.
Thank you very much.